Sloane Kensington broke into the expensive Greek villa through the back terrace. She had stolen a master key from a maid to avoid the front entrance. Her heart raced as she moved through the dark, quiet house. She found the primary suite and saw Xavier Castillo asleep in bed. She did not hesitate. She dumped a large bowl of ice water over him. Xavier reacted instantly. He lunged at her and pinned her to the bed with his weight. His reaction surprised her, but she quickly stood her ground. She demanded he get up and prepare for the gala in London. Xavier scowled at her, clearly annoyed, but recognized who she was. He admitted he had mistaken her for an intruder and realized how easily he could have seriously hurt her before recognizing her. He casually called her Luna, a nickname he refused to explain despite using it for years. He acted like he did not care about his responsibilities. He claimed he was staying in Greece. Sloane threatened him with the loss of his reputation if he did not cooperate. They argued about the past and his father. Xavier finally agreed to attend the gala on one condition. He wanted a vacation with her in Spain. More than the trip itself, Xavier wanted to pull her away from work and see if she could finally relax. He first demanded 3 weeks away with no work. After bargaining, they settled on 1 week, and Sloane reluctantly accepted because she could not miss her own plans in London. Xavier watched Sloane walk away with a mix of frustration and attraction. He remembered their first meeting years ago when he had decided he already hated his new publicist. She had disliked him just as quickly, and their constant arguments had begun from that very first meeting. At the gala, he stood by her side while Eduardo accepted the award for his father, Alberto Castillo. Xavier felt bored and restless. Sloane repeatedly reminded him to behave, because cameras were watching throughout the event. He kept trying to get a rise out of Sloane, but she remained focused on the event. She told him she was meeting someone afterward. This made Xavier feel strangely annoyed and jealous. He caught himself watching other men notice her during the gala and found himself wondering who she planned to meet. After the ceremony ended, Eduardo cornered Xavier to talk about his father. He explained that Alberto's condition had not improved and urged Xavier to visit him before it was too late. But Xavier insisted his father was the one who needed to make amends. He left the gala early and went to a nightclub called Neon to drink away his bad mood. He could not stop thinking about Sloane and her mysterious date. Sloane rushed through London to visit her younger half-sister, Penelope, known as Penny to most people but lovingly called Pen by Sloane. She had to be careful to avoid being seen. Ria, the nanny, let her inside the hotel suite. Penny was happy to see her and loved the gift Sloane brought for her birthday. She was the only member of the Kensington family Sloane still felt close to. The sisters spent time together watching a soccer game. Sloane felt a deep pain watching Penny, who suffered from chronic fatigue. Penny dreamed of playing sports, but her illness often left her too exhausted for normal childhood activities. Penny gave her a handmade friendship bracelet. Sloane treasured the gift because she rarely got to see Penny, and she worried about how much energy Penny had spent making it. The moment was interrupted when George and Caroline, their parents, returned early. Sloane scrambled behind the heavy velvet curtains to hide. She held her breath as her stepmother nearly found her. George and Caroline barely acknowledged Penny before going to their room, reinforcing how neglected she was. After her parents left the room, Sloane quickly escaped. She saw a news alert on her phone. Xavier had broken their agreement and gone to a club. She headed straight to Neon to fix the mess. Sloane pushed her way into the VIP room at Neon. She found Xavier drinking and surrounded by people. She confronted him about the agreement. Xavier argued that he had technically kept their deal because he stayed through the ceremony, and Sloane had never clearly forbidden him from visiting a nightclub afterward. She threatened to make a scene that would embarrass him in front of his friends. Xavier eventually got up and followed her out. In the taxi, they argued about the rules of their upcoming trip. Xavier insisted that work would not be allowed. Sloane argued that she had to keep her business running. So Xavier pointed out that checking work emails would break the promise she had already made, forcing her to negotiate new terms. They compromised by allowing her to briefly check work emails only to delegate tasks. He then insisted they fly to Spain immediately instead of waiting. Sloane knew she was losing the argument, but she agreed to go. She felt a sense of dread as they headed to the airport. The flight to Mallorca was quiet. Xavier had a recurring nightmare about failing to protect those he loved. The same nightmare had haunted him for years. Different people took the place of the one he failed to save, but it always ended with him helplessly watching someone important slip away. He refused to dwell on what the dream might mean. He went to the back deck to clear his head. He found Sloane doing yoga while replying to a personal message. Xavier mistakenly assumed she had already broken their agreement before she explained it was not work-related. They argued back and forth until he convinced her to join him for a day at the resort. Xavier insisted she stop reading another work-related book and actually enjoy the vacation before taking her around the resort. They went to the spa together. As they sat together in a private sauna, their teasing turned into open flirting, and the growing attraction between them became harder for both of them to ignore. Xavier kept asking about her bracelet and her family. He realized she had not been wearing the bracelet at the gala and became convinced it was connected to the secret visit she refused to explain, making him even more curious about Sloane and the family she refused to discuss. Sloane refused to tell him anything personal. She remained guarded. When their time was up, they tried to leave. Sloane turned the handle, but the door would not open. She looked at Xavier and told him they were trapped. Sloane and Xavier were trapped in the hot sauna until Xavier pointed out the emergency button on the wall. She pressed it, and the staff rescued them right away. They continued their day at the spa with relaxing massages and special treatments. During the massage, Xavier asked why she worked so hard. Sloane explained that she liked solving problems and being needed by others. Xavier admitted he was afraid of failing if he tried to do anything important. Sloane realized he was far more capable than he let people believe, making his fear of trying even harder for her to understand. When they returned to the villa, Sloane found that Xavier had invited his friends over for a loud party without asking her first. She became furious and threatened to leave the trip. Xavier apologized and promised not to host unapproved parties for 6 months if she stayed. He admitted he had genuinely forgotten his friends were arriving and had not meant to spring the surprise on her. He was clearly embarrassed that his thoughtlessness had upset her so badly. She agreed and reluctantly joined the bonfire party that evening. Xavier's friend Luca tried to flirt with her and asked her to dance. Even before interrupting them, Xavier watched every interaction between Sloane and Luca with growing jealousy, unable to ignore his growing possessiveness until he finally stepped in. He jokingly called her an ice queen, unaware that the words echoed years of criticism from her family and former boyfriend, leaving her devastated. She walked away and locked herself in the bathroom to cry in the shower. Xavier felt bad for upsetting her and noticed she avoided him the next day. Luca mentioned he wanted to pursue Sloane, but Xavier told him to stay away. He even tried steering Luca toward other women, unwilling to admit how territorial he had become. Sloane spent the day alone in the living room watching romantic comedies. Xavier came in and offered a sincere apology for his comment. They watched the movie together, and Sloane admitted she secretly wrote reviews for every film. Xavier read one of her harsh reviews out loud and made her burst into laughter. It caught him off guard because it was one of the rare times he had ever heard her laugh so freely. For the first time since the trip began, spending time together felt easy instead of becoming another argument. The mood between them shifted to a warm comfort, and Xavier challenged her to finish her dance lessons. Sloane finally agreed to give it another try. Xavier helped her with her dancing on the terrace and told her to stop overthinking every step. He went to the bar cart and mixed a special drink he named after her. He proudly claimed it suited her perfectly because it seemed bitter at first, but became unexpectedly sweet, just like the woman he believed she really was. They played a game of truth, or dare, using only truth questions. Sloane shared why she loved her work in public relations, but Xavier twisted his answer with humor without technically lying, making it clear he still refused to think seriously about his future. They started dancing again, and once Sloane stopped overthinking every step, her movements became smoother as she relaxed into his arms. The romantic tension grew very strong between them, and neither of them could pretend the attraction between them was only playful anymore. They leaned in close to kiss. A loud noise from the next villa interrupted the moment. Sloane pulled away immediately and hurried to her bedroom. Xavier could not stop thinking about the near kiss the next day. During a boat trip, he confronted Sloane about avoiding him. They agreed the moment meant nothing, but the awkwardness remained. They talked about superpowers, and Sloane chose time travel to fix past mistakes. Xavier remembered the tragic fire from his childhood that killed his mother. He still carried guilt over the tragedy and believed it had destroyed his relationship with his father. They talked briefly about their difficult family lives. It was one of the first honest conversations they had shared without teasing or arguing. Sloane suddenly got an email on her phone and looked pale and shaken. Xavier watched her walk away and wondered what was wrong. Sloane read the first message her father had sent her in years. He informed her that her sister, Georgia Kensington, was pregnant. Georgia was Sloane's full sister, but Sloane had never been as close to her as she was to Penny. Her father then dismissed her anger as a childish grudge and demanded that she make amends with the family. She refused to give in and decided to go out for the evening. Xavier saw her arrive at the nightclub wearing a striking cobalt dress and drinking heavily. She behaved nothing like her usual careful, controlled self, which immediately made Xavier realize something was seriously wrong. He kept a close watch on her as she danced. When another man pressed close to her, Xavier pushed the man away and carried Sloane outside over his shoulder. They argued angrily on the beach about her safety and his right to interfere. Their anger was fueled as much by their growing feelings for each other as by the night's events. Xavier insisted this reckless behavior was nothing like the woman he had come to know and demanded she tell him what had happened. Before she could answer his questions, her phone rang. She answered the call and told Xavier that his father was dying. They packed in a rush and flew back to Columbia in the middle of the night. Xavier sat quietly and looked exhausted, losing all his playful energy. Sloane quietly stayed by his side, giving him support while handling only the work that could not wait. Xavier looked back at his childhood when he and his father were close before the fatal fire changed everything. The memories reminded him that his anger had not erased the love he once felt for his father. Sloane shared her own painful memories of losing her mother, and for the first time, they openly connected over the grief they had both carried for years. It was the first time either of them fully let the other see the pain they had hidden for so long. They sat together in the cabin, sharing a quiet understanding as they headed toward the emergency. Xavier and Sloane arrived in Bogota, where his father's driver met them and drove them to the White Mansion. The mansion itself brought back painful memories, and every trace of smoke reminded Xavier of the fire that had killed his mother, making it difficult for him to be there. He offered Sloane a hotel room, but she refused and stayed by his side. Inside the room, Alberto lay frail and hooked up to many medical tubes, while Dr. Cruz confirmed his critical state. Tia Lupe insulted Xavier and brought up his mother, causing Xavier to lose his temper and grab her shirt before Sloane pulled him away. In private, Sloane warned him to control his anger for his future. Xavier asked if she ever wished someone dead, and she answered honestly. He quietly admitted he hated himself for feeling relieved that his father's suffering might finally end. She asked him what he would do next. Alberto remained near death, while Sloane searched the mansion and found Xavier sketching detailed bar designs. He explained his private hobby and talked about accepting a lack of closure with his father. Designing bars had long been a private dream, even though he had never believed he could turn it into a real career. Sloane was surprised to discover he had been quietly refining bar designs for years, revealing a creative side he had never shared with anyone. Xavier thanked her before Eduardo interrupted with urgent news. Xavier approached his father's bed, where Alberto begged Xavier to take over the family business, insisting it was his final wish. Xavier refused, but Alberto revealed that his late mother had left him a letter inside the top drawer of his desk. Xavier retrieved the envelope. The letter reminded him that his mother wanted him to choose the life that made him happy, assured him she would always be proud of him no matter which path he chose, and reminded him it was never too late to change direction. She also left him the family's treasured pocket watch, engraved with the reminder that time was life's greatest gift. Xavier began reading the heartfelt words his mother had written. Alberto slipped into a coma while Sloane managed the heavy media attention outside the gates. She entered Xavier's room and found him continuing to refine his bar designs. They talked about his feelings, and she stayed because she knew he should not have to face everything alone. Xavier admitted he had accepted that reconciliation with his father was impossible. Eduardo interrupted them shortly after to announce that Alberto had finally passed away. Xavier thanked Sloane quietly, realizing she had been the only person who had checked on him as Xavier instead of treating him like the Castillo heir, before leaving to face the reality of his father's death. Alberto Castillo, Colombia's richest man, former CEO of the Castillo Group, and Xavier's father, died peacefully at home that Saturday afternoon. Xavier felt strangely numb, relieved that the waiting was finally over while also struggling to accept that his father was truly gone. The complicated mix of grief, anger, and relief left him unable to cry. Sloane poured a drink and mentioned she could not cry from sadness, briefly referring to a past engagement. She admitted that losing her mother had changed the way she processed grief, making sadness feel distant even during painful moments. Days later, the family gathered for the reading of the will, which stated Xavier must become CEO before turning 30 to keep his inheritance. Xavier remembered his mother's letter encouraging him to follow his own path, the treasured family pocket watch she left him, and her reminder that time was life's greatest gift. Santos then read the names of the 5 committee members who would evaluate Xavier's leadership over the next 6 months before deciding whether Xavier could remain CEO. They included Eduardo Aguilar, Xavier's cousin Martin Herrera, Tia Lupe's husband, Mariana Acevedo, chairwoman of the Castillo Group's board, Dante Russo, a powerful businessman and family friend, and finally Sloane Kensington. Both Xavier and Sloane were stunned when her name was announced. Sloane and Xavier discussed the shocking will, and Xavier made it clear he would not run the Castillo Group because he was afraid of failing. She convinced him to leave the oppressive estate, and they slipped out the back to explore Bogotá. They visited museums, walked past colorful street art, and ate local food together. For the first time in years, Xavier appreciated Bogotá as something more than painful memories. Sloane asked if he would truly give up everything, and Xavier compared it to her own family struggles. Thinking through the will like a problem to solve, Sloane suddenly realized it never stated which company Xavier had to run, and proposed he start his own company. Xavier loved the idea immediately. He finally believed a different future was possible. The funeral concluded with Xavier giving a short eulogy for his father. Santos confirmed the wording of the will, and the committee gave Xavier 6 months before his first formal evaluation. Eduardo stayed on as the interim chief executive. Xavier flew back to New York and went to the exclusive Valhalla Club, where he met Kai Young. They talked about business and life over drinks. Xavier respected Kai's business success and wanted advice from someone who had built his own future. Kai reminded him that successful leaders built strong teams instead of trying to know or do everything themselves. Xavier realized he needed a strong team to turn the idea into reality. For the first time, he was working toward a future he had chosen for himself instead of one dictated by his father. He picked up his phone and called the first person on his list to begin building his own company. For the first time in years, the future felt like something he wanted instead of something he feared. A couple of weeks after returning from Spain, Sloane sat in her apartment with Isabella, Vivian, and Alessandra during a girls' night, listening to them ask questions about Spain and Xavier. She denied having any romantic feelings for him, insisting he was just a client, but her internal thoughts betrayed her growing attraction. After discussing Josephine and Vivian's new life as a mother, Sloane received a text from Xavier asking her to meet him at Valhalla. She went there after girls' night ended, and Xavier revealed his big plan to open a nightclub. He shared his detailed business notes and explained the vision and concept, leaving Sloane genuinely excited. He explained that he wanted the club to feel like a hidden world where people could leave reality behind, with unforgettable music, signature drinks, exclusive events, and surprises around every corner that created an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in New York. Every detail was meant to make guests feel as though anything could happen once they stepped inside. As they stood alone in the library, the romantic tension built up between them until Xavier leaned in and kissed her completely. After the kiss, panic set in about the professional consequences, because she also realized she was one of the 5 committee members responsible for judging whether Xavier deserved his inheritance, making her realize she had completely lost her professional distance and putting Xavier's inheritance at risk. She left immediately while admitting to herself that she might truly have feelings for him. Xavier could not stop thinking about the kiss and how it ruined his concentration. For the first time, he realized he wanted far more than attraction. He wanted to know Sloane outside work and build a real relationship with her. He met Sloane at her office to review the nightclub business plans, and he tried to bring up what happened, but she insisted they focus only on work. He persuaded her to join him for brunch at a restaurant, where she explained that dating him would threaten her professional integrity. Xavier apologized if he crossed a line and asked if she enjoyed the kiss, to which she felt very conflicted. He then openly asked her to go on a real date with him, but before she could answer, Mark showed up and claimed to be her boyfriend. Sloane immediately corrected him, explaining she had already ended their casual relationship before leaving for Greece, but Mark refused to accept the breakup. Mark refused to accept that they were broken up and demanded an explanation from Sloane. Xavier stepped in with a cold, lethal softness and firmly ordered Mark to leave, which Mark did out of fear. Outside the restaurant, Xavier asked for a chance to date her again, explaining that he wanted a real relationship rather than a casual hookup. After riding in a taxi and discussing their emotional walls, Xavier admitted they both kept people at a distance in different ways, encouraging them to stop hiding behind those defenses. Xavier admitted he wanted to know the real Sloane instead of the version she showed everyone else, while Sloane confessed she was afraid of letting someone get close enough to hurt her again. She finally agreed to a 2-month trial period and shook his hand on the deal, knowing everything had changed between them. Sloane spoke to Isabella on the phone before arriving at Xavier's townhouse for their first date. Xavier gave her a warm tour of his cozy home, sharing stories about his childhood, enemies, and pets. He brought her to the rooftop, which he had transformed into a cozy movie night setup with food, warm lights, and soft blankets, touching her deeply. She realized no one had ever planned something so thoughtful just for her, making it far more meaningful than any extravagant gesture. Sloane asked again why he called her Luna, but Xavier smiled and promised he would tell her one day if she was nice enough to him. They watched romantic movies together and talked about Halloween, friends, and family. As the evening went on, they stopped talking about work entirely, letting themselves enjoy simply spending time together. Xavier learned about the fish, the pet goldfish Sloane insisted was only temporary despite keeping him for years, making him laugh at her stubborn logic. Sloane lowered her guard and realized she had watched an entire romantic comedy without writing a single review. Xavier reflected on how successful their first date felt and met with Vuk Markovic, a powerful Serbian businessman known for his cold, unreadable demeanor, to pitch the nightclub and the Tastemaker series. The monthly events would give influential guests exclusive access to new products, performances, and experiences before anyone else, creating constant publicity for the club. Vuk listened with his usual cold silence. Although he rarely spoke, his reputation as one of New York's most powerful businessmen made his opinion carry enormous weight. He asked tough questions before writing down his final verdict. Come back when a location is secured. Xavier left disappointed but determined, and he met Sloane afterward to share the news. While they talked, Sloane received an urgent phone call informing her that Penny had been hospitalized after an accident on the street. Because of Penny's chronic illness, even a relatively minor head injury worried everyone, making the trip to the hospital necessary. Xavier drove Sloane to the hospital through heavy traffic, using money to clear cars and even driving partly on the sidewalk to reach her faster. He held her hand to comfort her during the stressful ride. Without asking questions, he focused only on getting her to Penny as quickly and safely as possible, giving her the quiet support she needed most. When they arrived, Sloane found George and Caroline outside Penny's room. Rhea helped her slip inside unnoticed, where she reunited with Penny, who explained she fell and hit her head. Penny told her that Annie was fired and then fell asleep, leaving Sloane to face the family outside. When she stepped into the hall, she was stunned to see Georgia and Bentley, George's husband and Sloane's ex-fiancé, the man she had once planned to marry before everything fell apart. Inside the hospital's brightly lit hallway, Sloane came face to face with her estranged father, stepmother Caroline, sister Georgia, and Bentley outside Penelope's room. Caroline insisted Sloane was no longer family, and George ordered Rhea to keep her away from Penelope. He reminded Sloane that she had forfeited any place in the Kensington family when she chose her career over his ultimatum years earlier. Georgia mentioned that George had contacted Sloane after learning about the pregnancy, and then mocked her single sister. Xavier arrived and publicly declared himself as Sloane's boyfriend. He deliberately exaggerated how hard he had pursued her, leaving Georgia visibly surprised and Bentley clearly unsettled. Bentley questioned their relationship because Xavier was a client, and Sloane shut him down by mentioning how his family bought his Princeton admission. After her family left, Sloane broke down and told Xavier that Bentley was her former fiancé who had cheated on her with Georgia, leading to her father's cruel ultimatum. Xavier comforted her. He firmly told her that Bentley's betrayal, Georgia's actions, and her family's rejection were never her fault, helping Sloane finally let go of years of misplaced guilt. Instead of going home, Sloane asked to go to a club. Xavier took Sloane to an underground salsa club and taught her the steps. He encouraged her to stop worrying about being perfect, let go of her need for control, and simply lose herself in the music, something she rarely allowed herself to do, leading to a romantic conversation about their future. They shared a passionate kiss on the dance floor before leaving for his house. There, beneath the moonlight, they became fully intimate for the first time, deepening both their physical and emotional connection. Afterwards, they teased each other over who had won their playful competition. Their teasing showed how quickly comfort and trust had replaced the awkwardness that often followed vulnerability. Xavier realized being with Sloane was the happiest feeling of his entire life. Chasing excitement no longer mattered as much as simply holding Sloane in his arms. 2 days after their first night together, and after nearly making Sloane late for work the following morning, Xavier traveled to Washington, D.C., to meet Alex Volkov, the powerful CEO of Archer Group and owner of the building containing the historic bank vault Xavier wanted for his nightclub. But Alex insisted he needed a proven business partner first. Alex gave Xavier until Thanksgiving to secure a signed partnership agreement before offering the location to someone else. Xavier continued his work with Christian Harper and Jules Ambrose, but still struggled with Vuk Markovich. With Vuk demanding a confirmed location and Alex demanding a confirmed business partner, Xavier found himself trapped in a stalemate. Later, Xavier surprised Sloane in Queens by bringing Penelope and Rhea to a sports simulation center. They played soccer games together, and Penelope privately warned Xavier never to hurt her sister. Xavier sincerely promised he never would. They spent the rest of the day together before enjoying dinner nearby. As Xavier watched Sloane with Penelope and remembered Pen asking whether he loved her sister, he found himself unable to stop thinking about the unexpected peace he felt whenever he was with Sloane. A few days after their outing with Penelope, Jillian noticed Sloane's unusually happy mood as she managed meetings with Asher Donovan and Ayana Kidana. Even while managing difficult meetings with clients like the soccer star and the model, she found herself constantly thinking about Xavier. Xavier unexpectedly visited her office. He had simply stopped by because he missed her, a gesture that caught Sloane completely off guard, and Sloane felt a brief flash of jealousy over Ayana, which Xavier immediately soothed. Afterwards, they lingered together in the quiet after their intimate moment, smiling at each other before reality interrupted. As Sloane rested in Xavier's arms, she realized she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. She was genuinely happy. The following evening, Xavier and Sloane met for dinner after work, and Sloane encouraged him to stop trying to impress Vuk with numbers alone and instead explain why the nightclub truly mattered to him. Xavier surprised her by renting an entire boutique hotel for the night. Wanting them to have complete privacy, he arranged for them to be the hotel's only guests. Over dinner, he shared memories of his mother and the story behind her letter and pocket watch. Xavier finally revealed the tragic truth of the fire he caused as a child, his mother dying while saving him, and the emotional abuse his father inflicted afterward. Sloane held his hand and told him the fire was never his fault. For the first time, Xavier truly allowed himself to believe that his mother's death had not been his fault. They ended the night swimming naked together in the heated rooftop pool, enjoying the quiet, the warm water, and a rare feeling of peace as they floated together beneath the city lights. Xavier reflected on finally telling Sloane the truth about the fire, realizing that sharing the secret he had carried since childhood had lifted a burden he had never realized was consuming him. Remembering Sloane's advice, Xavier stopped relying on business projections and honestly explained why building the nightclub mattered to him personally, finally convincing Vuk Markovich to sign the partnership agreement. Alex Volkov then approved the bank vault location. With both the location and Vuk's partnership secured, Xavier celebrated his success with Sloane as the nightclub finally felt like a real possibility instead of just an ambitious dream. Soon after, Perry Wilson published photos exposing Penelope's secret outing, resulting in Rhea getting fired. Furious that Perry had targeted Penelope for gossip, Sloane decided it was finally time to destroy his credibility. Xavier rushed to Sloane's office, where she refused to blame him and he promised to fix it. Sloane began her revenge plan against Perry. Then, Bentley unexpectedly called her phone and demanded they talk. Days after Bentley called, Sloane went to a quiet bar on a freezing Sunday to meet him. Bentley complained about Georgia shouting at him and throwing an expensive vase during her pregnancy. He admitted he made a mistake and still had feelings for Sloane, blaming her past busy work schedule for the end of their engagement. Bentley proposed they start an affair in secret while he remained married to Georgia. Sloane realized Bentley was only driven by his ego and saw right through his fake charm. She rejected his offer completely, told him he was a terrible partner, and praised Xavier as a much better man. After other patrons overheard them, Sloane tossed her red wine right into Bentley's face and walked out. She saved the audio recording on her phone and felt completely free as she headed home. Xavier worked hard on his new nightclub and met Killian Katrakis, the CEO of the Katrakis Group, who quickly recognized Xavier's deep hunger to succeed. Killian believed Xavier was driven not just by ambition, but by a personal need to prove himself, leaving Xavier unsettled by how accurately a stranger had understood him. Eduardo called Xavier to warn him about whispers concerning Sloane working as his publicist and serving on the evaluation committee. Xavier insisted Sloane would judge him fairly regardless of their relationship and said he did not care how it looked. Eduardo suggested his late father Alberto may have designed the will's loop to encourage Xavier's personal growth and offer a quiet olive branch. Xavier struggled with the idea. For years he had blamed Alberto for everything, but Eduardo's words forced him to wonder whether his father had tried to make peace in his own imperfect way before he died. Xavier met Sloane for lunch and handed her papers proving Penelope was safe and well cared for. The information eased one of Sloane's greatest fears by confirming Penelope was still in New York with a new nanny instead of being secretly sent overseas. Sloane felt deeply grateful and later learned Xavier was the anonymous person who sent money to help Rhea. Sloane and Xavier attended the holiday gala hosted by Dante and Vivian. Sloane talked to Kai Young and proposed a plan to eventually turn Perry Wilson's gossip site into a respectable news outlet after Perry was removed. Kai mentioned that Xavier had quietly asked him to suppress the bad blog post about Sloane back in Spain. Sloane realized Xavier had protected her reputation long before they started dating, and without ever asking for credit, making the gesture even more meaningful. Sloane felt deeply moved, and then executed her plan by speaking loudly about a fake affair to trap Tilly and her friends into spreading the gossip. She deliberately relied on Tilly's love of gossip, knowing the rumor would quickly reach Perry without anyone realizing they had been manipulated. After Xavier finished talking with Dante, who gave him only vague answers, they left the ballroom together. They slipped into a private restroom where Sloane pulled Xavier close, and they shared a passionate, close moment before joking about the mess. The following Monday, Perry published the false story about Soraya and Bryce, and Sloane watched the plan work exactly as she intended. Soon afterward, Soraya publicly exposed the story as completely false with solid proof, causing Perry's credibility to take a major public hit exactly as Sloane had planned. Georgia suddenly arrived at the office and accused Sloane of trying to steal Bentley, refusing to listen to the truth. Georgia made cruel remarks about Sloane and claimed nobody could truly love her because she did not cry when their mother died. She also mocked Sloane's relationship with Xavier and insisted he would eventually leave her, striking directly at Sloane's deepest insecurities. Sloane then played the audio recording of Bentley admitting he still wanted Sloane, which left Georgia totally pale and speechless before she ran away. Sloane went home early and found the fish floating lifeless in the aquarium. Though he had only been a temporary pet abandoned by a stranger, he had quietly shared her lonely apartment for 5 years, and the loss hit her far harder than she expected. She wished she could cry, just as she had after her mother's death, but no tears came. Overwhelmed by grief she couldn't release, she curled up alone on the couch and tried to escape the pain the only way she knew how. Xavier grew worried when Sloane missed their 7 o'clock dinner reservation and could not be reached on her phone, so he rushed straight to her apartment. He opened the door and found Sloane looking heartbroken because the fish had died. Xavier comforted her and shared his own painful story of losing his dog Hershey to help her feel less alone. Instead of trying to fix her grief, he simply stayed with her until she finally felt safe enough to rest, giving her the quiet support she truly needed. Sloane opened up and told him about Georgia visiting her office and the recording she played. Xavier promised her she could share anything with him and stayed to tuck her into bed, realizing he was deeply in love with her. He decided to keep his feelings a secret for a little longer while handling club business. Even so, Xavier realized his feelings had grown far beyond attraction, and that protecting Sloane had become more important to him than anything else. While at his tennis club, Xavier found Bentley talking loudly and rudely to his friends about Georgia in the locker room. Xavier walked straight up to him and reminded him to watch his mouth. Bentley made a snide remark about Xavier losing his status, and Xavier punched him right in the face. Xavier also warned Bentley to treat Georgia with more respect, making it clear he would not tolerate Bentley hurting either woman again. They scuffled briefly before Xavier slammed Bentley against the lockers and gave him a final warning never to approach or bother Sloane or Georgia ever again. Bentley backed down in fear, and Xavier walked out of the club with total certainty, knowing he would do whatever it took to keep Sloane safe from harm. Sloane noticed how naturally Xavier fit into her daily life and invited him to stay for the weekend. She tried to bake cookies and cupcakes for the first time, but a disaster happened when the smoke alarm went off and filled the kitchen with smoke. Xavier helped clear the air, and they ordered cupcakes instead, curling up to watch a movie. Sloane had secretly hoped baking would make their apartment feel more like a real home together. But Xavier gently reminded her that he loved being with her and never expected her to cook for him. She also realized the apartment still felt emptier without the fish, making Xavier's quiet presence mean even more to her. She later told him that Perry's accounts were banned after Soraya's fans swarmed his pages and mentioned a libel lawsuit by Bryce. Sloane confessed she tricked Perry with false tips, paving the way for Kai Young to buy his blog. She explained that Perry deserved it for building a business on lies and for dragging Penelope into his gossip. Xavier revealed he planned to donate half his inheritance. Most of the charities supported causes his father had openly disliked, making the donations Xavier's final act of breaking free from Alberto's control. Comforted by his decision, Sloane fell asleep peacefully beside him. Xavier kept his love for Sloane to himself while construction on the nightclub pushed forward. Vuk and Willow inspected the progress as Xavier explained his renovation plans for the vault. The lead electrician warned Xavier that the building needed a complete rewiring and that the aging wiring posed a safety risk. But the work could not be finished before the holidays, forcing Xavier to delay it. During the Saturday walkthrough, which he attended while Sloane slept, Willow noticed smoke, and a sudden electrical fire erupted. The fire triggered terrifying childhood flashbacks, but Xavier forced himself to keep moving, refusing to let another fire claim someone's life. He dragged Vuk safely to the exit, where firefighters rescued them both as the vault burned. Watching the vault burn felt like watching his future disappear before his eyes. Xavier sat in the back of an ambulance receiving oxygen for smoke inhalation as he learned that several construction workers had suffered severe burns. After overhearing firefighters suspect the outdated wiring had caused the blaze, he became convinced his decision to delay the rewiring had helped put innocent people in danger. Seeing the injured workers filled Xavier with guilt as his father's old accusations echoed in his mind, convincing him history had repeated itself and that his own mistakes had once again hurt innocent people. He became convinced he was responsible for every tragedy in his life, making it impossible to believe he deserved another chance. Sloane arrived to comfort him and pointed out the vault could be repaired, but Xavier became overwhelmed and angrily announced the club project was finished. He lashed out at Sloane and accused her of not feeling any emotions, and the moment the words left his mouth, Xavier knew he had struck at the deepest wound she carried, before he realized his mistake and watched her walk away in silence. Sloane replayed Xavier's harsh words in her mind, knowing he spoke from pain yet feeling deeply wounded. The day after Christmas, her friends visited to comfort her and urged her to speak with him before the dating trial ended, but Sloane privately decided to end the relationship. She believed ending things now would hurt less than risking an even deeper heartbreak later. Meanwhile, Xavier isolated himself in shame until he met Kai at Valhalla. Kai criticized him for acting like a martyr and reminded him that both he and Sloane believed in him, making Xavier realize Sloane had believed in his potential long before he had believed in himself. Xavier finally admitted to himself that fear of failing had become an excuse to abandon both the nightclub and the future he wanted with Sloane, so he rushed to her apartment to fix his mistakes. Xavier struggled to get past security until Alex Volkov granted him access to Sloane's floor. He apologized for his angry words after the fire, and Sloane offered her own apologies for pushing him too hard. But when he asked about their future, she insisted their trial period must end because she believed they were not compatible in the long term. Refusing to accept the breakup, Xavier reminded Sloane that their trial was supposed to be a decision they made together, refusing to believe she had stopped loving him. He finally confessed his deep love for her and explained he called her Luna because she was his guiding light. Overwhelmed and afraid of future heartbreak, Sloane lied that she did not feel the same and forced him to leave. Only after Xavier left did she admit to herself that she loved him just as deeply. For the first time since her mother's death, she finally cried, realizing loving Xavier had broken through the emotional walls she had lived behind for years. Xavier learned from Alex Volkov that the fire was deliberate sabotage rather than an accident, and Alex promised to hunt down the person responsible. The revelation that the fire had been deliberate sabotage made Xavier realize the tragedy had not been entirely his fault, giving him renewed hope that his dream could still survive. Alex challenged Xavier to decide whether the nightclub had become his true dream or whether he had only wanted it for the inheritance, forcing Xavier to confront what he really wanted while encouraging him to finish the club. Xavier returned to New York and witnessed Sloane calmly dismantling Perry Wilson's angry accusations in her office. After Perry left in humiliation, Xavier told Sloane about the sabotage and confirmed he would rebuild the vault independent of his inheritance. Refusing to accept her decision to break up, he asked her to meet him at the Empire State Building at midnight when the trial officially ended, promising to walk away forever if she failed to show. Sloane sat at lunch with her friends and felt the heavy weight of the clock ticking down. Xavier wanted an answer tonight at midnight, but she told herself she would stay away and protect her heart. She excused herself to the restroom and unexpectedly bumped into Caroline, who told her that Penelope was refusing to eat and missed Rhea terribly. Caroline offered a deal where Sloane could see Penelope again if the little girl started eating her meals. Sloane left the conversation torn between hope and suspicion, unsure whether Caroline had truly changed or was simply hiding another motive. Sloane rushed back to her office and spent the afternoon putting out stressful fires with demanding clients and panicked co-workers. As the clock edged closer to midnight, her heart finally won the argument against her fears. She ran out into the cold city streets, fought her way through a delayed elevator and a crowded parade detour, and finally reached the observation deck of the Empire State Building. Xavier was there, and as he held her close, she broke down in tears and confessed her love before they shared a long, healing kiss. Xavier confessed he had waited for hours despite believing she might never come, and explained he had only stepped away to help an elderly couple after sending her a message she never received because her phone had died. Xavier and Sloane stumbled into her apartment, hands and mouths all over each other. They left a trail of clothes to the bedroom where he pushed her onto the bed and took his time kissing and tasting every inch of her, especially her breasts and between her thighs until she was desperate. He put on a condom and sank deep inside her, fucking her with slow then hard strokes that made the headboard slam. She came hard around him, nails digging into his back, pulling his own intense orgasm with her. He held her close, cuddling her against his chest as they caught their breath, feeling completely content and possessive of the woman in his arms. They lay wrapped in each other's arms, joking about her neighbors hearing them through the walls. For the first time since they met, both felt completely certain they had found the person they wanted beside them. They teased each other easily, and Xavier reaffirmed his love before they both fell asleep in total security. They spent the rest of the holidays almost inseparable, enjoying quiet mornings, terrible movies, endless conversations, and ordinary moments that made being together feel effortless after everything they had survived. Xavier spent the next weeks working hard to repair the fire damage at the vault while visiting Vuk to check on his recovery. Vuk silently asked him to ensure Ayana received an invitation to the grand opening. He refused to let the setback define him and accepted that the club's success would come from his own effort rather than his father's legacy. Meanwhile, Sloane returned to her family penthouse where George and Caroline agreed to let her see Penelope every week. Seeing Penelope and Rhea together again reassured Sloane that her younger sister finally had the support and stability she had desperately needed. Penelope tackled her in a joyful hug alongside Rhea, who had returned to the house, while Georgia made empty comments about Bentley that Sloane calmly ignored and left behind. Leaving the penthouse, Sloane realized Georgia's opinions no longer held any power over her, allowing her to walk away from their rivalry with a sense of peace she had never felt before. Over the next 4 months, construction on the club faced many delays, but Xavier pushed through every obstacle and finished the renovation just in time for his birthday. The grand opening filled the venue with the city's most important faces, and the successful opening proved to Xavier that the vault had become his own dream rather than a project driven by Alberto's conditions. The next morning, Xavier attended the committee Zoom call. Before the vote, Mariana questioned whether Sloane could remain impartial because of their relationship. Sloane openly admitted she loved Xavier, but explained that seeing his hard work firsthand only strengthened her belief that he had earned the position. Her response shifted the discussion back to Xavier's achievements before the committee cast their votes. Mariana and Martin voted no, but Eduardo and Sloane voted yes before Dante cast the final deciding vote in his favor. Xavier officially passed the first inheritance evaluation, validating both his growth as a businessman and the faith Sloane had placed in him from the beginning. He and Sloane celebrated their victory with a private, passionate moment. 18 months later, Xavier had already passed his third inheritance evaluation under Alberto's will. He donated half of the inheritance payment to charity, and the vault had become so successful that he no longer needed the inheritance. He was already planning to open a new location in Miami. Sloane officially moved her remaining boxes into the townhouse, where Xavier surprised her with a feisty new goldfish. The move marked a milestone they had both been ready for after taking their relationship one step at a time, and they happily settled into sharing the townhouse as their home. They both continued their therapy sessions, which helped them heal from past family shadows and stay close to Penelope. Therapy helped Sloane accept that she could never change Georgia or erase the past, allowing her to focus instead on the family and future she had chosen for herself. Xavier also found that therapy helped him finally come to terms with his father and leave the past behind instead of searching for answers that would never change his future. After attending Isabella's celebration, they traveled through Spain. They spent a month exploring Madrid, Seville, Valencia, Barcelona, and finally returned to Mallorca, the place where their relationship had first begun to change. Being back in Mallorca reminded them how far they had come since the uncertainty and misunderstandings that had first brought them together there. Sloane realized she no longer feared sunsets because they no longer represented losing the people she loved. Instead, they reminded her that every ending could also lead to something new. Watching a movie together, she realized that happy endings were real and that her own story had finally found its true home.